Fighter's Destiny is a hilarious and incredible fighting game, especially considering it was released on the N64. I'm definitely overstating how fun this game is with my title. It obviously doesn't deserve a spot at EVO of all places, but at least allow me to explain why I think this game is so good. Now, unlike other N64 fighting game titles I've covered in the past, Fighter's Destiny was created for the N64 specifically, which kind of blows my mind. Many of the fighting games for this system were just ports from the arcades of the times or older PlayStation games. Because this game was made with this system in mind, the developers actually managed to use the N64 controller to the benefit of this game. Its control scheme makes it really easy to get used to playing, even without ever looking at your character's move list. A and B buttons mixed with many different directional inputs will execute all of your attacks in this game, and there's no random use of the C button directions to fill any extra functions. It really does feel good to play right out of the box with a regular N64 controller, and that goes a long way compared to other fighting games I've played on the system. Aside from how nice the controls are, I'm sure you've noticed from the footage in the background that this game is basically Nintendo's attempt at a Tekken / Virtua Fighter type of fighting game, and I think the devs did a really good job. Considering you only have 2 attack buttons and a D-pad to play with, the move lists are pretty extensive with each character. Jumping attacks, attack strings, throws, throw techs, and counter throw options are all available. It's honestly just as easy to pick up and learn as Tekken is. You start by pressing buttons and directions, and before you know it, you've got enough moves to build a game plan around. All things considered, this is already a great base to be working with for an N64 fighting game, but what if I told you there's one more mechanic that plays a huge part in actually winning fights in Fighter's Destiny? Underneath your health bar, there's a line of stars. The points you score by winning a round accumulate as stars, and once you've filled all of them, you've won the match. The way points are determined though is not by the number of rounds that you win, but how you win them. In Fighter's Destiny, if your character gets knocked to the ground, even just once, you've lost. Whether by throw or a powerful attack you weren't ready for, you will be trading rounds with your opponent quickly here. Even the health bars in this game aren't going to knock your opponent out right away. When you deplete your opponent's health, they'll enter a sort of stunned state that you can take advantage of by sending them to the ground to actually score some points, but during this stunned state, your opponent is still able to jump and duck your attacks. Just stunning your opponent doesn't mean that the fight is over by any means. At the start of every match, you'll be given an outline showing every way to win points, and it's best that you know every method of scoring too. We've got 3 points for knocking down the opponent, 2 points for throwing them to the ground, 3 points by counter throwing the opponent, which I believe can be done in countering their attacks like most fighting games do counter hits, as well as literally countering the opponent's throw and following up with your own. We've got ring outs in this game for 1 point, even if it's pretty hard to actually get it to happen. Special attacks that will automatically send opponents to the ground if they're hit will award you points, and apparently a judge ruling gives 1 point. I'm not really sure where this judge point comes into play, as I've never really run into it myself, but maybe it's for timeouts or something like that. So what we have here in a big picture scope is a Tekken style game with relatively simple controls where the goal is not to deplete your opponent's health, but to outsmart them with your strategy to get them on the ground before they get you. It's honestly so much fun to play, and especially when you're able to outsmart the person you're fighting. I'm surprised I've never seen this game before, or even this type of idea where the real fight is staying on your feet. The gameplay rocks. I feel like I've gone on long enough about it, but there are still some really cool features in this game that are worth talking about. First off, of course, we have an arcade mode versus CPU players, as well as a player versus player mode. We all saw that coming. But then what we have next is this sweet training mode. In training mode, we have free training, as well as a few different options to choose from depending on what we're looking to train against. That's useful in its own right, but what I'm most surprised with here is the frame meter, giving you a decent idea of the frame data that you're working with in Fighter's Destiny. This really shocked me, as I really haven't seen anything like this until Street Fighter 6 came around with its fantastic training mode frame counter. Turns out, Fighter's Destiny was way ahead of the game all the way back in 1998. The next mode we have is actually 3 different challenge modes you can choose to play. In survival, you basically just have to win a single round versus your opponent with the goal of fighting through all 100 fighters, I guess. Sounds kinda ridiculous, but that's the mode. Second, we have fastest, which is described as trying to beat your opponent within a minute, but I didn't fully understand it on my first attempt. I managed to beat my opponent in a 4-point round in under a minute, and then they handed me a second opponent. I managed to just barely squeak out a victory against them as well before a minute struck on the timer, and then in my fight with my third opponent, the timer crossed over a minute and nothing really seemed to happen. I did lose my third fight. Maybe it would have ended my run after the third one even if I won, since it went over a minute or something. Maybe you have a minute per opponent that you fight before you lose in this mode, putting my third fight at a total of 3 minutes, or maybe you just have 1 solid minute for each opponent and the overall timer doesn't really mean anything. Honestly, I'm not sure, but it might be fun to jump back in and find out exactly what's going on. Our third mode here is called Rodeo, and it's ridiculous. You basically have to fight this cow character. Yes, there's a cow in this game, while trying to stay in the ring. There were a few times where I stayed in for about 10 seconds and many others where I got immediately owned and proceedingly twerked on by this cow fiend. Regardless, I guess my best run is about 12 seconds. While those challenge runs are all well and good, we actually have something of a roguelike mode here as well. It's called Master Challenge, and basically you need to stop this rotation to see whether you fight the Master, who will teach you new techniques every time you beat him, or a Jester, who I believe is just a difficult encounter. I haven't beaten the Jester in any of my attempts, so it's hard for me to say whether or not you learn moves by beating them as well, but it is kind of interesting. This mode, I definitely put a few more attempts in than the other ones because it's pretty fun trying to use the brand new moves that you're given between successful rounds. On top of the game modes, we actually have some options to choose how big the arena is, how many points should be awarded for different kinds of takedowns, and many other things that will help customize your experience playing this game. It's also worth noting that every character in this game has one alternate costume, and I just think that's dope. Some of them are just recolors, but most of them are completely new costumes, and you just don't see a whole lot of that with old fighting games, I feel like. Fighter's Destiny is somehow a shining gem of its time. I can't believe the amount of fun I had exploring the potential in this game. If you ever do get the itch to, I highly recommend even just emulating this game with a couple friends and finding out just how fun this game really is. If you like videos on older video games, or just videos of me gushing about how much I love different video games, please do consider clicking one of the videos on screen now. And if you like that one as much as you like this one, maybe subscribe to my channel so you can see what's up every time I post. I've been posting every single Friday for over 6 months, so you definitely have some videos to catch up on and some brand new content every week to catch as well. As for this week, I gotta go watch some of my favorite fighting games over at Evo. My name is Myloe, and I'm out.